I really worked on this because of what I knew about what you people are doing and what Dr. Asun is doing with you, and I think it's fantastic. And I love your museum, your show. Honestly, I've taken 3 or 4 pictures because I learned a lot, and I'd like to give it back to you. And in fact, it's amazing because what I'm talking about is so completely focused on the week of letters and on the Asian versus Western kind of, meeting place. But fundamentally, it's about how the way we treat language and the way the language treats us makes the foundations of our culture. And it does that through writing. That is why you can't read this. I can hardly read it myself, but it says literacies versus ideography. Potential differences in perception with references to arts and literature. And it because different languages dominate differently, and because different systems that support language shape language differently in our minds, it affects the way we think. Now, how many Chinese people are in this class? Don't get mad at me for what I'm going to show you. Is there a quick exit? Okay, I didn't say that, but Marshall McLuhan, who was my professor and who is very famous, died in 1980, but he's very famous. And McLuhan once said to us, I was in class like you are with me, and he said to us, the Chinese are illiterate. And we said, oh, Dr. McLuhan, how can you say a thing like that? And he said, well, they don't have letters. It was a very profound remark. That doesn't make Chinese people stupid at all, far from it. But it does make a fundamental difference in dealing with language. If you don't deal with words, but you deal with ideas. That's the point. So the hypothesis is that the writing system are the common origin and format of some of the recurring differences between East and West cultures. And the idea is to identify those various common things and see how they connect with the way we write. So, different writing systems reflect different languages, create different cultures, favoring individualism or community. Now, this is a banal theme. Everybody knows there is a much stronger sense of community in Eastern Asia than there is, let's say, in Europe. Much stronger. It's a banality, but why is it that way? That's what's interesting. Okay, so language shapes writing. One strong Chinese example. Chinese is a monosyllabic language. That means the words are monosyllables. There's so many syllables there are in human voice production, right? So there are thousands of homonyms. A homonym is when the sign, or rather when the sound is the same for absolutely different words. So you see, a monosyllabic language requires, it doesn't simply just choose this, it requires being written in pictures. But if it's written in pictures, and yes, I know that very soon when you learn to read Chinese fast enough, the pictures really are words, but the fact is they begin as pictures. And they leave around themselves an area of interpretation which is much larger than the words written phonetically, let's put it this way. So language shapes writing. Writing controls language. Of course it does. It channels language. But once, and language controls mind, once the system that carries language is used, it inspires the user with its own structure. And that's why I say writing controls mind. You don't believe me? My point is, it all depends which direction you read. If you read Hebrew or Arabic, you will read to the left. If you read normally Greek, Roman, English, French, Spanish, you will see that it's going from the bottom and rising on the left, and it's going down on the right. Now, why am I showing you this example? Just to show you that the impact of a very simple thing, which is just the direction of reading and writing, is actually shaping your mind in such a way that most of your films, the films that the Western world produces, start the action from the left and go to the right. Our eyes are not just two, they're four half eyes. Two left side, left visual field, the ones that you see here, right? And two right visual field. The thing is that the both left one are run by the right hemisphere, and both right ones are run by the left hemisphere, because that's what the chiasmus is. It's crossing, and the reason it's crossing is to allow the juxtaposition of left, right, so that you have the whole field covered by both eyes. Why would not two eyes be enough? Because this hemisphere and that hemisphere don't do the same thing. You follow me now? Yeah. They don't do the same thing. This one takes the view of the world, and that one cuts the world. If you take bread and you cut it. That one is the analyzer, this one is the grabber, or seeing everything at once. So the right hemisphere grabs the whole visible area, where the left hemisphere, just think about the bread. You need one hand to hold the bread and the other one to cut it. And it's the same way that the eyes work about studying, analyzing, seeing the visual field. This is why the perspective was invented. We'll get to that. So why Westerners write horizontally from left to right? It's a very good question. Especially if you consider that the Chinese used to write vertically. Now they don't, but they used to write vertically until 1956. I'll tell you why later. But in 1956 they began to write horizontally. But the fact is they used to write vertically, and the columns would go from right to left. So the first column went there, then the second there, and the second, and so on. So it's very interesting. There is constancy there. Fully alphabetic scripts, like Greco-Roman, require to prioritize analysis over holding. That's the really, you see, you have a continuous flow. So the only way you can actually decipher that continuous flow is by getting one thing after the other, analyzing the system. Writing phonetically is writing the flow. Whereas writing, and there are different kinds of writing. For example, when the Greeks invented the Greek alphabet, which became the Roman alphabet, our own alphabet, the Western alphabet, they put vowels between consonants. The consonants existed before. They existed because they had been invented by the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians, almost 500 years before, had invented a system. You know how the Phoenicians invented that system? They were slaves of the Egyptians. They were working in mines, turquoise mines, and they didn't want to be understood by their bosses. So they invented this code, which was taking the initial sound of some of the pictures of Egyptian writing. They took those, and those became consonants. But they had no vowels. They had no vowels because they didn't need them. What? You don't need vowels for a language? Well, for the language you do, but for the writing you don't. You don't if the vowels don't do the same thing as the consonants. And this is the story of Hebrew or Arabic, all Semitic languages. The consonants are the words, usually 3, and the vowels are the grammar, the relationship between the words. So these culture, for example, here, cow, toe, beth are the 3 consonants that make the general idea of writing, book, writer, critic, and so on. So you can see the vowels appear in between, but they are not shown. And normally in the normal writing, the vowels are not shown. Why? Because the idea is to get the reader to guess what the word says by context. So it's a very different strategy to deal with deciphering text than sequencing text, which is what the Greeks do, right? So all phonetic literacies, from syllabaries to alphabets, favor sequential processing over holding the visual field, because they have to cut it in order to get it, otherwise they don't get it. So they are written to the right, except Kharosthi in India. An ancient writing from the 3rd century, which stopped being used in the 4th century, rather from the 4th century, stopped being used in the 3rd century before Christ, and it was something that was actually written to the left and was phonemic. But as I said, it didn't last, and we don't know. And some people say it wasn't written to the right, so make up your mind. Whatever. By and large, that's what it is, except the Hebrew and Arabic, which are written to the left. The absence of vowels between consonants obliges the reader to guess. That is no the context. Okay, so the Hebrew system, I explained that. Why does it matter? What cognitive consequences for Westerners? I'll first talk about Westerners, and that gives you a basis from which you can compare what I have to humbly present to you, humbly because really I'm not an expert, on East Asian writing system and their consequences. So first of all, the recognition invention of perspective is the result of the right visual field taking over the leadership in vision. That's when gradually in the Renaissance brings in the perspective, depth of vision, all the things that come and makes and fix space. One of the most important things for the Western mind is to have reliably stable, fixed space in which he or her can, or she can actually move, like a stage. Perspectivism pushed to extremes in the highest forms of trompe-l'oeil. Trompe-l'oeil was using a flat surface and pretending it was profound. Vertical and oral culture of the cathedrals. In the cathedral, there is hardly any writing. No, there is, but it's handwriting. There is no print. And it's very expensive and very rare and very poorly read because very few people actually can read. So it's an oral culture. It's a culture of a hierarchy. It's a culture of the vertical relationship between the creator and the creation. That's the basic idea. So they build vertically, as high as they can. Within the arrival of the Renaissance, suddenly all buildings flatten out. Suddenly all buildings become a memory of horizon. The horizon of the written word. The conquest of the self. First of all, if you can completely represent language, not ideas, but language, you can actually separate the text from its context. You can't do that in Hebrew or Arabic. The text is always secured by its context. Separating the text from the context allows you to put the text in other contexts or elsewhere. Hence, innovating all the time. All the time recombining text like you recombine the genetic code. Second, separation of reader from text. Very important. If you have to learn the Bible or the Quran or the Mahabharata, all of these sacred books by heart, it is not the same thing at all as having the text outside. You stop remembering it. You can trust this thing. So you separate the text from the context, you separate the reader from the text, and eventually you separate the reader also from the context, which means that in the history of religions, there is a tendency, particularly in the Christian one, to have a dwindling down effect. Very, very strong at the beginning, or taking its speed and then becoming terribly strong, running the whole art world of Europe till the late 18th century. Taking control of language by writing, I've told you that before, and silencing language. Silencing language is taking full possession of it. The first time people noticed this was in the 7th century, after Christ. Saint Ambrosius was seen reading with only moving his lips, but not letting any sound out, and the guys who reported on him thought he was possessed by the devil. Can you believe that? It took so long for people to learn to read in silence, but once they start to read in silence, they could hold in themselves all their secrets, all their feelings, and so on. This is finished. This is over. This is the first time in history, your time, our time, that control over thought, and that control over words, and that control over language is not in our hands anymore. That's another story. I won't get into it today. But it's obviously the story of hypertext. It's a story of the digitization of language. It's a story of total control of each one of our lives by tracing each one of our movements. Something that's happening very strongly in Singapore, to give an example from East Asia. So making the self private is very key. It's interesting, for example, to recognize that the Greeks invented destiny, the idea of destiny, by these three rather ugly goddesses, these three ladies there which are floating about. They are the goddesses of death. And the one on the left is the one who spins the thread of destiny. And the one in the middle is called Lachesis, and she is the one who measures the thread of destiny. And the one on the right is the one who tells you that's it. She's called Atropos, means no movement. She has scissors and she casts the line. That's the story, the narrative, the beginning of a westernized storytelling system, with death in the end. And in fact, a great deal of tragedy in between. The image of the literate self. Now, here's another story for you, or rather another idea from which to get to the same point that we're getting to. It's the story of guilt. We know shame cultures and we know guilt cultures. Anybody did some anthropology here? You know, when something goes wrong, do you feel more ashamed or do you feel more guilty?
Guilty.
The guilty is internalizing shame. Shame is your responsibilities to other people. Your family, your father, the neighborhood. That's what shame is. It's an other-oriented sense of responsibility. If nobody has seen you doing something wrong in a shame culture, you have not done it. And you don't feel guilty at all, even if it's a murder. Guilt is the moment when, as we take in and silence language and learn all these silent messages that come from reading novels, that come from reading, in fact, generally, we internalize the sense of responsibility. Now I have a destiny, I am responsible to that destiny. If I do anything wrong, it doesn't matter if nobody has seen me, I know it, and I don't feel good. That's guilt. And so Shakespeare, all the plays of Shakespeare about somebody guilty. Hamlet, the Macbeth, King Lear, all theater introduced a sense of guilt in the culture, as novels do. But of course, it's supported by the fact that because you read, you are reading, and you are actually creating this internal space. Theater was a big... Theater was like turning the mind into space. Theater was, you put a stage and you put characters on that stage, and they're contained, and their story and what you are looking at is completely like a thought expressed. Then you internalize it. Then you don't need theater anymore. That's why theater dies out at the end of the 18th century in France. Dies out, I mean, it continues, of course, but it's just nothing like what it used to be, because novels take over. Once you have learned to internalize theater, making it in your own head by reading a novel, you don't need theater anymore. That's what happened. That's why novels are really growing very, very strongly in the 17th, 18th, and 19th century. History and fiction furnish Western imagination, and desacralizing the body, we start cutting. The body is always sacred in our culture, not in this one. In this one, you have Andres Vesalius, who was the first one to cut the bodies apart, dead bodies, of course. I want to reassure you. But no, it's not that everybody did that. But anyway, so you cut the body, and you just find out what it's like. So very soon after you start cutting the body, you have to consider the body as a machine. Hence, treaties about man-machine and so on in the 17th and 18th century. Literate man is a subject of his own private mind and controls language from a point of view. When questioned about their attitude and behaviors, people in more individualistic Western societies tend to value personal success over group achievement, which in turn is also associated with the need for greater self-esteem and the pursuit of personal happiness. But this thirst for self-validation also manifests in overconfidence, with many experiments showing that participants are likely to overestimate their abilities. When asked about their competence, and I'm sure that Aston will find this funny, when asked about their competence, for instance, 94% of American professors claim that we're better than average. Well, actually better than average, of course, all of you would claim that you're better than average, but the fact is, it's interesting that that is the first thing that comes to their mind. The tendency for self-inflation appears to be almost completely absent in a range of studies across East Asia. In fact, in some cases, the participants were more likely to underestimate their abilities than to inflate their sense of self-worth. And this is classic. Some of the notable differences revolve around the concept of individualism and collectivism. That's why I said that what I'm saying is not original, but how it connects is what we want to see. So, we're now into ideography, and I want to salute and thank the people who have done the lovely ideographic exhibit that is below here. I mean, it was incredibly instructive for me. I didn't have time to integrate what I learned in this, but the point is, I will later, because I'll think about it. Okay, so the basic principle, I think I made it clear, of Chinese, Japanese, and Korean script is that they are ideas, they're images, but not words. You know? So they don't deal with language. Here's another story. I love stories because they help me. No, really. Anybody of you has used Google Translate? Yes. Come on, be honest. Yes. All right, everybody. Okay. Do you know how it works?
How it works?
Yeah, how does it work? They don't use meaning. That's the most amazing thing. It's another relation to language that we have. They don't use meaning because what they do is they use shape. There's a shape of a sentence and it appears in such and such way in very many different documents. They analyze all these documents at once using 0-1 and instant analysis, and they come up with a translation which is not perfect but surely good enough for you to correct. So that's what it is. So the basic principle of ideography could be very close to that, except that it's ideas and not words, right? Ideography favors foveal vision. Foveal vision is distinguished from peripheral vision because it's the most precise. It's at the center, so that if both your eyes are looking at a point right in front, it's the maximum precision you have in seeing. Peripheral vision, on the other hand, is what you see on the side. Some people have a very large vision on the side, other people more restricted, but peripheral is for horizontal. Here's my reason why I said 1956 things have changed. Mao Zedong, or his government, the famous Mao Zedong. Remember Mao Zedong? Nobody remembers Mao Zedong. That's bad news. That's bad news. Anyway, he decided Chinese writing would be written from the left to the right horizontally. So my question is, did he know that he would change the Chinese psyche itself? Does reading horizontally slow down Chinese readers? I mean, if you have to orient your vision and your interpretation, do you lose nanoseconds? You might say, well, who cares? But no, it's important. It can even change the way that you see. An eye-tracking study by Richard Nisbet at the University of Michigan found that participants from East Asia tend to spend more time looking around the background of an image, working out the context. Whereas people in America tend to spend more time concentrating on the main focus of the picture, which is, of course, the text. Intriguingly, this distinction can also be seen in children's drawing from Japan and Canada, suggesting that the different ways of seeing emerge at a very young age. And by guiding our attention, this narrow or diverse focus directly determines what we remember of a scene at a later date. And so Heinrich, who is a student, this is, if we are what we see and we are attending to different stuff, then we are living in different worlds. Easy conclusion. With modernity, Chinese preference for the verticality of their writing line adapted to the horizontal 3/4 ratio of the Western TV, cinema, and video screens. You might say they had to. Well, no, they didn't. They certainly didn't do it for their painting. A great majority of traditional Chinese painting is vertical. Here are some major differences, and they're useful for understanding the arts. First of all, in the vertical culture, there's a strong attention to shapes and to the ground, to the basis of something. Westerners tend to focus on figures and forget the ground, that it came from this situation. So examining the whole context is much more an Eastern way and focusing on just the event. Just the facts, man. So, iconic sign, phonetic signs, evoking and suggesting. A haiku. Haiku is all suggestion. Condensing imagery key notion as opposed to translating the modulation of spoken language. Polyvalence of signs, whereas Western write with univocal value of signs. Simple grammar, guessed by context, like the situation in Hebrew and Arabic. Complex grammar that defines unambiguously a relationship between signs. This is the way Western people do. Text as art form. Calligraphy, anybody? Text as art form in the East. Text as information. After we invented the printing press, we forgot about illuminating and designing, like the medieval manuscript with beautiful colors and fantastic lines and great signatures and whatnot. No. Started printing, it all became abstract and functional. But look at this. This is the I Ching. Anybody knows about the I Ching? We need to start at zero. But anyway, no. I Ching is a divining book. It's called the Book of Changes. And in the religion today, you see a lot of people in the East, they are holding yarrow sticks, and they shake them, and then according to the way they fall, they can get to a big book which contains all these little signs, and reading the succession of signs allows them to understand their future or their present. So what it is they are using a special kind of divining technique, like people use tarot cards or other cards, right? And what about Korea? So we have one Korean, but it's still important to know. Korean and Japanese are not bound to ideography. Why? Because they are polysyllabic, not monosyllabic. Polysyllabic means that words are made of more than one syllable. That means you can have a great deal of combination between various sounds and have a great deal of words which are represented by the sound and not by the image. So kana, katakana, hiragana, or hangul are perfectly common sense way of dealing with writing those languages. And believe it or not, King Sejong, who invented it in 1443, and who looked carefully, spent so much time trying to impose it against all kinds of resistance, actually eventually created Hangul. And Hangul was resisted by his successors, and then picked up again, and eventually imposed itself as a way to deal with the language generally. And here is the book that was published, you could say, in 1443. They would have wood prints already in Korea. Koreans are very inventive, very inventive. And here you have the kanji characters, the standard ideograms, and you have the phonetic characters of the Hangul. So the book is teaching how to translate characters, Chinese characters, into phonetic characters. So that's what it is. The principle of Hangul is phonetic. Its invention signals the beginning of an age-old relationship of Korean culture with technology. Koreans, why are they so good at making smartphones? Because they love technology, like Japanese too. The Japanese and the Korean depend on technology. People in a more collectivist society tend to be more holistic. You hear a lot about this, holistic, in the way they think about problems, focusing more on the relationship and the context of the situation at hand, while people in individualistic societies tend to focus on separate elements and to consider the situation as fixed and unchanging. As a simple example, imagine that you see a picture of someone tall intimidating someone smaller. Without any additional information, Westerners are more likely to think this behavior reflects something essential and fixed about the big man. Essential that his manner, his way of being is that way. He is a nasty person. Whereas if you're thinking holistically, you would think other things might be going on between those people. Maybe the big guy is the boss or is the father. So it's an entirely different way of looking at things. 1,700 generation of oral language, 30 generation of writing, 35 generation of printing, and this is the changes that happened. And here we don't even have 10, well, we now have 10 generation of electricity. To be continued.